The war changed everything about humanity. 6 months after the first Zephyrian attack, human society had transformed into something the aliens never expected. President Alex Carter stood in the new war room built deep under the mountains of Colorado. The room was filled with displays showing human space, but now most of the markers were green again. "Admiral Sullivan," President Carter said, "are we ready for Operation Homecoming?" Admiral Kate Sullivan nodded. She looked different now. The tired woman who had faced the first attacks was gone. In her place stood a confident military leader who had learned to think like her enemy's worst nightmare. "Every ship is in position," Kate said. "Every crew has been trained in adaptive combat. We're ready to take the fight to their home world." The plan was audacious. Instead of defending human space, humanity would attack the Zephyrian Empire directly. Every human ship, from military vessels to converted cargo haulers, would strike at the heart of Zephyrian power. Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral, commanded the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. His flagship was still the Defiant, but it had been rebuilt with new weapons that no Zephyrian had ever seen. "Commander Torres," Jake said to Rachel, who now served as his second in command, "begin the final equipment check." Rachel smiled. She had become an expert at unconventional warfare. Her specialty was turning everyday objects into devastating weapons. "All ships report ready," Rachel said. "The mining ships have their asteroid launchers loaded. The cargo vessels have their surprise packages ready. Even the passenger liners are armed with escape pod missiles." Dr. Emma Stone's new weapons were installed on every ship in the fleet. But the most important weapon wasn't technology at all. It was the way humans thought. Every crew had been trained to abandon normal tactics the moment a battle began. Human fleet jumped into hyperspace and headed for the Zephyrian home system. It would take 3 days to reach their target. During those 3 days, the crews practiced the most important skill of all, creative chaos. On Zephyria Prime, High Commander Vextar prepared for what he believed would be the final battle. His home system was defended by the most powerful fleet in Zephyrian history. Over 400 warships surrounded the planet, each one equipped with weapons that could destroy cities. "The humans are coming," Vextar told his war council. "Our scouts detected their fleet approaching. They have perhaps 200 ships, most of them converted civilian vessels. Should we be concerned about their unconventional tactics?" asked one of his officers. Vextar's eyes burned with anger. "No, I don't care how creative they are. We outnumber them 2 to 1, and our ships are far superior. This will end the human threat forever." But Vextar had made the same mistake as every Zephyrian commander before him. He was thinking like a military strategist. Humans had stopped thinking like military strategists months ago. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the Zephyrian system, in a formation that made no sense to military minds. Instead of a battle line, the ships were scattered randomly across space. Some were flying in spirals. Others were spinning like tops. A few were flying backwards. "What are they doing?" the Zephyrian fleet commander asked. "Unknown, sir," his tactical officer replied. "Their formation appears to be completely random." "No matter," the commander said. "All ships attack formation. Destroy them." The Zephyrian fleet moved into perfect attack formation, just as their training required. But the moment they began firing, the human ships did something no military computer could predict. They started dancing. Every human ship began moving in patterns that seemed to have no purpose. They spun, they spiraled, they changed direction randomly. The Zephyrian targeting computers, designed to track logical military movements, couldn't lock onto targets that moved like they were having fun instead of fighting a battle. "Direct hit on the enemy flagship," reported Ben Parker from his position on the Defiant. But Ben wasn't talking about weapons fire. He was talking about a cargo ship that had just rammed a Zephyrian cruiser while its crew sang drinking songs. Over the radio, the battle became chaos. Human ships used every crazy tactic they had learned during months of desperate fighting. Mining vessels threw asteroids like snowballs. Passenger liners launched their swimming pools as projectiles. One cargo ship opened its hold and released thousands of rubber balls that jammed Zephyrian sensor systems. Maya-chan, now the chief engineer of the human fleet, had her crews do things that violated every rule of space combat. They used welding, torches as close-range weapons. They turned garbage into guided missiles. One creative crew used their ship's kitchen equipment to launch hot soup at enemy fighters. The Zephyrians had trained for every possible military scenario, but they had never trained to fight enemies who used kitchen appliances as weapons. There, rigid thinking couldn't adapt to this level of creative insanity. "Sir," the Zephyrian tactical officer reported, "the humans have somehow turned their life support systems into weapons. They're shooting breathable air at our ships." "That's impossible," the fleet commander replied. "Air isn't a weapon. Tell that to the crew of Cruiser 7, sir. They can't see anything because their sensors are clogged with human atmosphere." Admiral Jake Morrison watched the battle from his bridge and felt something he hadn't felt in months: joy. His people were fighting like humans instead of trying to be something they weren't. "Rachel," he said to Commander Torres, "time for the final surprise." Rachel grinned and activated a special communication system. Every human ship began broadcasting the same message on all frequencies. It wasn't a military communication. It was music. Specifically, it was a children's song about friendship and working together. The psychological effect on the Zephyrian fleet was devastating. They were warrior species who had conquered the galaxy through fear and superior firepower. Now they were being defeated by enemies who sang children's songs while fighting. "Hi!" Commander Vexstar watched his fleet being destroyed by tactics that made no sense. Human ships were ramming his vessels while their crews laughed. Others were using industrial equipment to literally bite chunks out of his cruisers. One human captain was steering his damaged ship directly into a Zephyrian dreadnought while broadcasting a recipe for chocolate cake. "This is impossible," Vexstar said. "They're not fighting logically." "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a message from the human fleet." "What do they want?" Vexstar demanded. "They're asking if we want to surrender." Vexstar stared at his tactical display. Half his fleet was destroyed or disabled. The humans had turned space combat into something that looked more like a carnival than a battle. His perfectly trained warriors were being defeated by people who treated war like a game. "Sir," another officer reported, "our remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat." For the first time in his life, Vexstar realized he had been completely outmatched. Not by superior technology or better soldiers, but by a way of thinking that his species had bred out of themselves centuries ago. "Open a channel to the human fleet," Vexstar said quietly. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the communication screen. He was smiling. "High Commander Vexstar," Jake said, "we'd like to discuss terms for ending this war." "You've defeated us," Vexstar said. "How?" "Simple," Jake replied. "You taught yourselves to be perfect soldiers. We stayed human. And humans, when we're backed into a corner, don't just fight back. We fight back with everything we've got, including our imagination." The peace treaty was signed aboard Admiral Sullivan's flagship 1 week later. The Zephyrian Empire agreed to withdraw from human space and pay compensation for the colonies they had destroyed. More importantly, they agreed to share their technology with humanity in exchange for protection from other aggressive species. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of his ship and watched the stars. The war was over. But humanity had been forever changed. They had learned that their greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military power. It was their ability to adapt, to create, and to never give up hope. Dr. Nathan Brooks approached Jake with a data pad. "Admiral, we've received reports from the outer colonies. They want to know what our plans are for expanding into former Zephyrian space." Jake smiled. "Tell them we're going back to what we do best. Exploring, building, and making friends with anyone who wants to be friendly. And if we meet another species that wants to fight." Jake looked at the stars and thought about everything humanity had learned. "Then we'll remind them why it's never a good idea to attack humans first. Because when humans hit back, we hit back hard." The Zephyrians had started a war thinking they were dealing with a weak species. Instead, they had awakened something in humanity that would make the galaxy a very different place. Humans had learned to fight, but more importantly, they had learned to fight like humans. And that made all the difference. Dr. Nathan Brooks worked day and night in his underground laboratory beneath Earth's surface. He had been studying dead Zephyrian soldiers for 2 weeks, and what he found changed everything. "Admiral Sullivan, you need to see this," Nathan said, into his communication device. His voice was tired, but excited. Admiral Kate Sullivan arrived at the laboratory with General Kevin Hayes and President Alex Carter. They found Nathan standing over a table with a Zephyrian body on it. "Look at this," Nathan said, pointing to the alien's muscle structure. "Their genetic modifications make them incredibly strong. But there's a problem. They can only do what they were designed to do." "Explain that in simple terms," President Carter said. "Think of them like tools," Nathan replied. "A hammer is great for hitting nails, but terrible for cutting wood. The Zephyrians have made themselves into perfect hammers, but they can't become saws when they need to." Admiral Sullivan studied the alien body. "So they can't adapt to new situations?" "Exactly. Their soldiers are programmed for specific roles. A Zephyrian warrior can't suddenly become an engineer or a pilot, but humans can. We're not as specialized, which makes us more flexible." General Hayes leaned forward. "How do we use this against them?" "We stop fighting them the way they expect," Nathan said. "We use tactics they've never seen before. We adapt faster than they can respond." Captain Jake Morrison was already putting this idea to work. He had been given command of a new unit called the Ghost Fleet. His job was to attack Zephyrian supply ships using unconventional methods. Jake stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Defiant. It wasn't a military vessel. It was a converted cargo hauler with mining equipment welded to its hull. "Captain," said Commander Rachel Torres, his second in command, "we found a Zephyrian supply convoy in the asteroid belt near Jupiter." Rachel had volunteered for the Ghost Fleet after her home colony was destroyed. She was angry and wanted revenge, but she was also smart enough to fight strategically. "How many ships?" Jake asked. 6 cargo vessels and 2 escort ships, replied Ben Parker, the tactical officer. Ben was young, but he had good ideas about unconventional warfare. "Perfect," Jake said. "Maya, are our mining charges ready?" Maya Chun, the ship's engineer, nodded. She had spent 3 days converting asteroid mining explosives into ship-to-ship weapons. The charges weren't designed for space combat, but that was exactly why they might work. "The Zephyrians have never seen mining charges used as weapons," Maya said. "Their shields are programmed to stop military weapons, not industrial explosives." The Defiant approached the Zephyrian convoy, hidden among a group of asteroids. The enemy ships were moving in perfect formation, just like their military training taught them. "Remember," Jake said to his crew, "we're not trying to fight them fairly. We're trying to confuse them." The first mining charge struck the lead Zephyrian ship. The explosion tore through its shields like they weren't there. The aliens had never programmed their defenses against this type of attack. Direct hit, Ben shouted. Their lead ship is dead in space. The Zephyrian escort ships turned to attack the Defiant, but Jake was already moving. Instead of fighting like a military vessel, he flew his ship like a mining craft, using industrial equipment in ways the aliens couldn't predict. Naya activated the ship's mining tractor, beam, and grabbed a large asteroid. She swung it like a club, smashing it into one of the escort ships. The Zephyrian captain had no idea how to respond to such an attack. "This is working," Rachel said. "They don't know what to do." Within 30 minutes, the entire Zephyrian convoy was destroyed or disabled. The Ghost Fleet had won its first victory using tactics no military academy had ever taught. News of the victory spread quickly through human space. For the first time since the war began, people had hope. If Jake Morrison's small ship could defeat a Zephyrian convoy, maybe humanity had a chance after all. On Earth, the war effort was transforming society. Dr. Emma Stone led a team of scientists working on new weapons. They weren't trying to build better versions of existing technology. They were creating completely new types of weapons that the Zephyrians had never seen. The key is unpredictability, Emma told her team. Every weapon we build must work differently from military weapons. The aliens program their defenses based on what they expect to face. Factory worker Sam Johnson was converting car manufacturing plants to build combat machines. But these weren't normal military vehicles. Sam's team was building machines that could change their function in the middle of battle. "Look at this," Sam said to his supervisor, showing him a new vehicle design. "It starts as a transport truck, but it can convert into a mobile weapons platform in 30 seconds. The aliens won't know what they're fighting." Programmer Alice Davis was working on the most important project of all. She was creating artificial intelligence systems that could evolve during combat. "Human thinking is chaotic," Alice explained to her computer programming team. "We change our minds, we try crazy ideas, we make mistakes that sometimes work. The Zephyrians think in straight lines. Our AI needs to think like humans, not like machines." The first test of these new strategies came at the Battle of Titan Station. The Zephyrians were attacking one of humanity's last major space stations near Saturn. Commander Rachel Torres led the defense with a fleet of converted civilian ships. "Remember," Rachel said over the communication system, "we're not a military fleet. We're a group of miners, cargo haulers, and passenger ships that happen to have weapons. Fight like civilians, not like soldiers." The Zephyrian attack began exactly as their military doctrine required. Their ships moved in perfect formation. Their weapons fired in coordinated patterns, and their tactics followed centuries of successful conquest. But the human defenders didn't follow any military doctrine at all. A cargo ship used its loading crane to grab a Zephyrian fighter and throw it into an asteroid. A passenger liner launched its escape pods filled with explosives, creating a chaotic minefield. A mining vessel used its ore-crushing equipment, literally bite chunks out of an enemy cruiser. The Zephyrian commander had trained for every possible military scenario, but he had no training for this kind of chaos. His ships were designed to fight other military forces, not crazy civilians using industrial equipment as weapons. "Tactical report," the Zephyrian commander demanded. "Sir, the humans are using mining equipment as weapons. They're throwing asteroids at our ships. One of their vessels appears to be trying to ram us while playing loud music." The commander stared at his tactical display. None of this made sense according to military logic. Increase firepower. Destroy them all. But the more firepower the Zephyrians used, the more creative the humans became. When their ships were damaged, human crews simply abandoned military thinking entirely. Engineer Ben Parker turned his damaged ship into a giant bomb and guided it manually into a Zephyrian. CRUICR. His sacrifice destroyed the largest enemy ship in the battle. The Zephyrians retreated from Titan Station in confusion. They had superior technology and better soldiers, but they had no idea how to fight an enemy that refused to follow any rules. Hi, Commander Vextar received the battle report with growing anger. His forces were supposed to be conquering the human home system by now. Instead, they were losing battles to cargo ships and mining vessels. How are we losing to such primitive technology? He demanded. Sir, his tactical officer replied, the humans are not fighting logically. They use tools as weapons. They sacrifice ships for no tactical advantage, and they constantly change their methods. Our computer systems cannot predict their behavior. Vextar realized he was facing something new. Every species his empire had conquered had fought predictably. They used military tactics, followed logical strategies, and surrendered when the cost became too high. But humans seemed to become more dangerous. When they were losing, they turned their weaknesses into weapons and found ways to fight that made no sense to military minds. Double our forces, Vextar ordered. If unconventional tactics are their strength, we will overwhelm them with sheer numbers. But as Vextar planned his next attack, he didn't understand the most important thing about humans. The more pressure they faced, the more creative they became. And creativity was about to become humanity's greatest weapon. The New Horizon arrived at Earth 3 days after the first attacks. Jake Morrison had never seen his home planet in such chaos. Military ships were flying everywhere. Civilian transports packed with refugees were arriving every hour. The normally calm space around Earth looked like a disturbed anthill dot. Admiral Kate Sullivan met Jake at the military station above Earth. She was a tall woman with gray hair and tired eyes. Kate had been in the Space Navy for 30 years, but she had never faced anything like this. Captain Morrison, Kate said as they walked through the station's corridors. Your report about the attacks has reached the highest levels. A president wants to hear everything you saw. How bad is it? Jake asked. Kate stopped walking and looked at him. 4 colonies are completely gone. 2 more are under attack right now. We've lost over 3 million people in 5 days. Jake felt sick. 3 million people dead, and the war had barely started. They entered a large briefing room filled with military officers and government officials. President Alex Carter stood at the front of the room. He was a young man who had won the election by promising peace and prosperity. Now he was leading humanity into its first alien war. Captain Morrison, the president said, tell us exactly what you saw at Haven's Rest. Jake described the attack in detail. He told them about the massive alien ships, the energy weapons that destroyed everything, and how the aliens never tried to communicate. When he finished, the room was silent. Dr. Nathan Brooks has been studying the wreckage we recovered, President Carter said. Doctor, please share your findings. Dr. Brooks was a thin man with thick glasses who studied alien life. He walked to the front of the room carrying a data pad. The enemy calls themselves Zephyrians, Dr. Brooks said. We found some of their technology in the debris from their attacks. They are physically superior to humans in every way. Stronger, faster, and more resistant to damage. Their weapons technology is at least 50 years ahead of ours. What about their numbers? Asked General Kevin Hayes, the head of Earth's ground forces. We estimate they have over 200 warships, Dr. Brooks continued. Each ship carries thousands of soldiers. They appear to be a military empire that has conquered many other species. The room erupted in worried voices. Admiral Sullivan raised her hand for quiet. We need to focus on defense, she said. Our fleet is outnumbered, but we can still protect Earth and the remaining colonies. No, said President Carter firmly. We need to evacuate as many people as possible. This enemy is too strong. We should try to negotiate. Sir, With respect, General Hayes said, these aliens didn't try to talk before they started killing. I don't think they want to negotiate. While the leaders argued, the attacks continued. Colonel Beth Warner was fighting for her life on New Boston, one of humanity's military training worlds. The Zephyrians had landed troops on the planet's surface, and Beth was leading the defense of the main city. Fall back to the next building, Beth shouted to her soldiers. They were retreating through the city streets, fighting from building to building. The Zephyrian soldiers were terrifying. They stood 8 feet tall and moved faster than any human. Their armor could stop bullets, and their weapons could cut through concrete walls. Beth's troops were brave, but they were losing. Badly. Colonel, said Sergeant Tony Martinez over the radio, we've lost contact with the North Wall. I think the aliens broke through. Beth looked around at her remaining soldiers. She had started with 500 troops. Now she had less than 50. They had been fighting for 2 days without sleep. How much ammunition do we have left? She asked. Not much, Tony replied. Maybe enough for one more fight. Beth knew they couldn't win, but she also knew they couldn't give up. Every minute they fought gave more civilians time to escape Dot in space above New Boston. Captain Lisa Turner was loading refugees onto her transport ship. The safe haven was designed to carry 100 passengers, but Lisa had packed in over 300. People were sitting in hallways and storage rooms. Captain, said her first officer, we're getting reports of alien ships in this system. We need to leave now. Lisa looked at the crowds of people still waiting to board. There were families with small children, elderly people who could barely walk, and wounded soldiers from the fighting below. 5 more minutes, she said. We can fit a few more people. Captain, if we wait too long, we'll all be dead. Lisa knew he was right, but how could she leave people behind? These were innocent civilians who had done nothing wrong. The aliens wanted to kill them simply because they were human. Back on Earth, the military leaders were making desperate plans. Admiral Sullivan stood in the war room, looking at displays showing human space. Red markers showed where colonies had been destroyed. Yellow markers showed colonies under attack. There were very few green markers left. Our ships can't match their firepower, she told General Hayes. In every space battle, we lose 3 ships for every one of theirs we destroy. What about our ground forces? Hayes asked. It's even worse on the ground. Their soldiers are just too strong and too fast. Our troops are brave, but courage alone isn't enough. Dr. Brooks entered the war room, carrying a tablet computer. He looked excited about something. I've been studying the alien bodies we recovered, he said. I think I found something important. What is it? Admiral Sullivan asked. The Zephyrians have been changing their bodies through genetic modification for hundreds of years. They've made themselves perfect soldiers, but they've also made themselves very specialized. What does that mean? General Hayes asked. It means they're very good at doing one thing, but they can't adapt quickly to new situations. They're like machines programmed for war. Humans are different. We're not as strong or as fast, but we can change our thinking quickly. Admiral Sullivan thought about this. So if we can find ways to fight that they don't expect. Exactly, Dr. Brooks said. We can't beat them with strength, but maybe we can beat them with surprise. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alarm. A communications officer ran into the room. Admiral, we're receiving a message from the Zephyrian fleet. They're demanding our complete surrender. Admiral Sullivan took the message and read it quickly. Her face grew hard with anger. They're giving us 24 hours to surrender all human worlds, she said. If we refuse, they promise to destroy Earth. President Carter entered the room and heard the last part. What's our response? Admiral Sullivan looked at the president, then at General Hayes and Dr. Brooks. These aliens had murdered millions of innocent people without warning. They had destroyed peaceful colonies and were now threatening to destroy humanity's home world. Our response, Admiral Sullivan said firmly, is no. We will never surrender to murderers. The president nodded slowly. Then we're committed to fighting, no matter what the cost. Yes, sir, the admiral replied. And maybe Dr. Brooks is right. Maybe we can find a way to use our human adaptability against them. We just need to figure out how. Outside Earth's atmosphere, a Zephyrian fleet waited for humanity's answer. High Commander Vexstar was confident that the humans would surrender. Every other species had given up when faced with such overwhelming force. He was about to learn that humans were unlike any species he had ever encountered. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars through the large window. The New Horizon was not a warship. It was a research vessel filled with scientists who studied rocks and minerals from space. Jake had been flying ships for 15 years, but he had never seen anything as beautiful as the asteroid belt around Kepler 442. Captain, we found something interesting in Sector 7, said Dr. Lisa Hamilton. She was the lead scientist on the ship. Her job was to find valuable minerals that humans could mine. Lisa walked over to Jake with a data pad in her hands. Her eyes were bright with excitement. What did you find? Jake asked. He took the data pad and looked at the numbers on the screen. The readings showed large amounts of rare metals in one of the asteroids. This could be the biggest find in years, Lisa said. The asteroid has enough platinum to power 100 space stations. We need to get a mining team out there right away. Jake nodded and turned to Ryan Cooper, his communications officer. Ryan was young, but very good at his job. He had joined the crew just 6 months ago, after finishing his training on Earth. Ryan, send a message to Earth Command, Jake said. Tell them we found a major platinum deposit. Request permission to begin mining operations. Yes, sir, Ryan said. He turned to his console and began typing the message. The communication would take 4 hours to reach Earth, and 4 more hours to get a reply back. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew of 37 people were the best humans had to offer. They came from 12 different worlds, all working together to help humanity grow among the stars. Engineer Danny Rodriguez was checking the ship's systems. Navigation Officer Carol Price was plotting their course to the next asteroid. Everyone was doing their job perfectly. This was what peace looked like. For the first time in human history, there were no wars happening anywhere. The 12 human worlds were working together. Children were growing up without fear of attack. People believed that humanity had finally learned to live in peace. Jake did not know that far away. Other eyes were watching them dot high. Commander Vexstar stood in his war room and looked at the holographic display showing human space. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 47 worlds, and they had been the strongest force in this part of the galaxy for 1,000 years. They had conquered dozens of other species by using superior weapons and better soldiers. The humans are expanding too quickly, Vexstar said to his war council. His voice was cold and hard. They have established 12 worlds in just 50 years. If we let them continue, they will become a threat to our empire. But sir, said one of his officers, the humans have shown no signs of aggression. They appear to be a peaceful species. Perhaps we could trade with them instead of fighting them. Vexstar turned his burning red eyes toward the officer. The Zephyrians were tall and thin, with gray skin and sharp features. They had been changing their bodies through genetic modification for centuries, making themselves stronger and faster than they were naturally. Peace is weakness, Vexstar said. Every species we have encountered has tried to use peace to buy time while they built weapons to use against us. The humans will do the same. We must strike first. The War Council nodded, in agreement. They had seen this pattern many times before. A new species would appear, seem peaceful at first, then tried to challenge Zephyrian power. The solution was always the same. Complete destruction. Prepare the fleet, Vextar ordered. We will eliminate the human threat before it can grow any. Larger. Jake was eating dinner in the ship's cafeteria when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed throughout the New Horizon as Ryan's voice came over the speakers. Captain, to the bridge immediately. We're detecting massive energy signatures approaching human space. Jake dropped his food and ran to the bridge. When he arrived, he found his crew staring at their screens in shock. The sensor display showed dozens of large ships moving at incredible speed toward human space. What are those? Jake asked. Unknown vessels, Ryan said. His voice was shaking. They appeared out of nowhere about 10 minutes ago. They're heading straight for our colonies. Lisa ran to her station and began analyzing the sensor data. Captain, these ships are huge. Some of them are over 2 kilometers long. Their energy readings are off the charts. Try to contact them, Jake ordered. Maybe they're just passing through our space. Ryan sent out a standard greeting message on all frequencies. The message identified the New Horizon as a peaceful research vessel and asked the unknown ships to respond. There was no answer. Captain, Carol said from her navigation station, I'm tracking their course. They're not just passing through. They're heading directly for Haven's Rest. Haven's Rest was a farming world with 2 million people. It was one of humanity's most successful colonies, providing food for 6 other worlds. The thought of those unknown ships approaching such a peaceful place made Jake's stomach hurt. Set course for Haven's Rest, Jake ordered. Maximum speed. Sir, we're a research ship, Benny said. We don't have any weapons. What can we do against ships that size? We can warn people, Jake said, and we can witness whatever happens. The New Horizon raced through space, but they were too far away. Jake watched helplessly as the unknown ships reached Haven's Rest. What happened next would stay in his memory forever. The alien ships did not try to communicate. They did not demand surrender. They simply began firing. Massive beams of energy struck Haven's Rest through orbit. The planet's defense stations were destroyed in seconds. The energy weapons cut through the planet's shields like they were made of paper. Within minutes, the surface of Haven's Rest was glowing red hot. My God, Lisa whispered. They're destroying everything. Jake watched in horror as 2 million innocent people were murdered. The farming towns, the cities, the spaceports, everything was being turned into molten rock. The attack was not random. It was systematic and complete. Captain, Ryan said, I'm receiving emergency signals from other colonies. Proxima Beta has gone silent. New Geneva is reporting attacks in progress. This was not a raid or a territorial dispute. This was genocide. Someone had decided that humanity needed to die. Get us out of here, Jake ordered. Set course for Earth. Maximum speed. As the New Horizon fled toward home, Jake realized that humanity's age of peace was over. They were at war with an enemy they had never seen before, an enemy that wanted them completely destroyed. The aliens had made one mistake, though. They thought humans would be easy to kill. They were about to learn how wrong they were.